My son stole $1.5 million from me, but it wasn't a significant loss. He destroyed everything I'd built, from a flawless company to the very idea of a family. Now, instead of an inheritance, he has a mop, a rag and dish soap, and a salary of $200 a week. Hi friends, I'm glad you're here with me today. Before we dive in, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments, and now let's step right into the story. It all crystallized at a dinner party, one of those charity events in a downtown Denver hotel where the air smells like money and expensive perfume. My son Grayson was at the head of the table, charming everyone. He was always good at that. He wore a suit that probably cost more than my first work van. Someone asked him how he got his start, and he laughed. He gestured toward me with his wine glass. You see that woman there? That's my mother, Antonia Reed. She founded Pioneer Cleaning. Let me tell you, she's the highest paid janitor in the state of Colorado. The table chuckled politely. Grayson smiled, pleased with his joke, but I saw the flicker in his eyes. It wasn't a joke. It was what he really thought. I'm 68 years old. I've built a $10 million a year business from nothing. And to my son, I was still just a janitor. The word hung in the air, thick and foul. It was the first time in 30 years I felt dirty in my own business. That night, the drive home was silent. I didn't say a word. Neither did he. But something had cracked. A foundation I thought was solid rock. A week later, he bought the car. A silver sports car that looked like a spaceship, $120,000. He parked it in the driveway of the house I bought him and his wife, Clara, 10 years ago. A little bonus for myself, he said, avoiding my eyes, for a record quarter. I checked the numbers. There was no record quarter. That was the second crack. The signs had been there for a year, maybe longer. I just hadn't wanted to see them. He started calling our employees the cleaners. I'd correct him every time. They're technical staff, Grayson. They're professionals. He'd just wave his hand dismissively. He started taking business trips, always to Las Vegas or Miami. I'd ask him what cleaning contracts we were chasing in casino resorts. He'd give vague answers about networking with hotel conglomerates. It made no sense. Our business, our reputation, was built right here in Colorado. We cleaned hospitals, corporate headquarters, schools. We didn't clean poker tables. Then Clara, my daughter-in-law, came to me. We were at the kitchen table, the one where we used to sign contracts and plan schedules, when the company was just the three of us. Now it was a place of strained silence. She looked tired. Antonia, she said, her voice low, our personal expenses. They're out of control. I tried to talk to Grayson, but he just gets angry. He says I don't understand the cost of doing business at his level. His level. As if he wasn't the executive director of a cleaning company. He was acting like the CEO of a Wall Street firm. He started wearing designer suits to the office where the dominant smell is bleach and industrial soap. My own son, who grew up on the money earned from that smell, acted like he was ashamed of it. The final argument happened a month after the dinner party. It was brutal and short. I confronted him about the car, the trips, the spending. He was cornered, and he came out swinging. Not with his fists, but with his words, which were far sharper. He stood in the living room of his perfect house, the one I paid for with 30 years of sweat, and he sneered at me. I'm tired of it, he said, his voice dripping with contempt. I'm tired of pretending this is some noble profession. I'm tired of smelling like bleach all the time. I'm 43 years old and people still think of me as the janitor's son. He took a breath, his face twisted with a resentment I never knew he harbored. So yes, I took what I deserved. I took it to live like a normal, successful man, not like the hired help. He threw the words at me like rocks. I didn't say anything. I just pointed to the door. He left. He didn't look back. I stood there, alone, in the immaculate house he had just filled with filth, and I knew, with a cold certainty, that this was a mess that couldn't be cleaned with a mop and bucket. Clara Reed was a numbers person. She found comfort in balance sheets, in columns that added up, in the clean, indisputable logic of accounting. For 15 years, she'd been the chief financial officer of Pioneer Cleaning Services. She was good at her job, meticulous, honest. She was also my son's wife, and her world of clean logic was about to fall apart. It began with the annual audit, a routine check. But Clara noticed something odd, a small thing. The expenditure on cleaning supplies was up by 20%. Not alarming on its own, but we hadn't taken on that many new contracts. Our client roster was stable. It didn't make sense. She decided to dig deeper, quietly, after hours. She didn't want to raise a false alarm. She trusted her husband, mostly. She started with the invoices from our primary chemical supplier, a company called Apex Solutions. They had been our supplier for the last 4 years. The prices seemed high. She cross-referenced them with market rates from other national suppliers. Her blood ran cold. We were paying 3, sometimes 4 times the standard price for everything. Bleach, floor wax, disinfectant, millions of dollars in overpayments over the years. She pulled the incorporation documents for Apex Solutions. The listed owner was a holding company. It took her 2 days and a favor from a friend who specialized in forensic accounting to unravel the ownership structure. The trail ended at an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, an account that belonged to a shell corporation. And the sole signatory on that corporation was Grayson Reed, her husband, my son. She felt sick. She sat in her office late at night, the glow of the monitor illuminating her pale face. It was a clear, calculated fraud. He had set up a fake company to leech money from his own family, from his own mother, but that was only the beginning. The inflated supply costs didn't account for all the missing cash flow she was starting to uncover. There was another hole, bigger and more insidious. She turned her attention to the payroll, 512 employees. She started running the names against Social Security databases. Most of them checked out, but then she found one that didn't, then another and another. It was the Dead Souls scheme, a classic, deceptively simple. Grayson had created dozens of phantom employees, fictional janitors, supervisors, administrative assistants. They had names, employee numbers, and weekly paychecks. He had authorized every single one. The money, direct deposited every 2 weeks, was funneled through a series of accounts before landing in the same place as the Apex Solutions profits, his secret offshore fund. She stared at the list of fake names. John Miller, Susan Davis, Robert Chen, ghosts on the payroll, their salaries funding her husband's lies. She thought of the real employees, the men and women who worked through the night cleaning hospitals, scrubbing floors, people she knew by name. He was stealing from them too, from their profit sharing, from the company's stability. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place when she started tracing the outflows from that offshore account. There were wire transfers, not to brokers or investment firms. They were going to a personal bank account in California, to a woman named Maria Sanchez. There were credit card statements linked to the account, charges for jewelry from stores on Rodeo Drive, rent for a luxury apartment in Santa Monica, payments to a private preschool. Clara felt the air leave her lungs. She did a public records search. Maria Sanchez. She found a social media profile. It was public. The profile picture showed a smiling young woman, maybe 30 years old, and she was holding a little boy. A boy about 3 years old. He had Grayson's eyes. It was a second family, a secret life, built on a mountain of lies and stolen money. Over 5 years, he had siphoned off nearly $1.5 million from his mother, from his wife, from the company his mother had built with her bare hands. Clara printed everything, the fake invoices, the payroll records with the ghost employees highlighted, the wire transfers, the picture of Maria and the little boy. She put it all in a plain manila folder. Her hands were shaking, not with anger, not yet, but with a profound, soul-crushing grief. The numbers didn't lie. and the truth they told was worse than anything she could have ever imagined. Clara drove to my house the next morning. It was a Saturday. She didn't call first. She just appeared at my door, her face a pale, drawn mask. She was holding the manila folder like it was a bomb. I knew, the moment I saw her eyes, that this was it. This was the answer to the questions I'd been afraid to ask. I led her to the kitchen table. The same table. I poured her a cup of coffee. Her hands trembled so much the cup rattled against the saucer. She didn't drink it. She just pushed the folder across the table toward me. "Antonia," she whispered, her voice cracking, "you need to see this. I am so sorry." I opened it. I am not a numbers person like Clara, but I understand business. I understand betrayal. The documents were clear. The inflated invoices from Apex Solutions. The articles of incorporation with the labyrinthine trail leading back to Grayson. The payroll registers with neatly highlighted rows of names I had never seen. Names of people who didn't exist. I saw the sums. $300,000 a year. $1.5 million over 5 years. The sheer scale of the deception was breathtaking. It was methodical. It was cold. It wasn't a desperate mistake. It was a strategy. Then I saw the last set of papers, the bank statements from California, the name, Maria Sanchez, the rent payments, the jewelry stores, and finally, the printed photo from her social media page, a pretty woman, a small child with my son's smile. I looked at the date on a post beneath the picture. It was from 2 months ago, my birthday. I remembered that day. Grayson had called me. His voice rushed. "Happy birthday, Mom. Sorry, swamped at work. I'll make it up to you." He had forgotten. Or, I now realized, he had been busy buying a diamond bracelet for his other life, a life he paid for with my money. I looked at Clara. Tears were streaming down her face now, silent and steady. "I didn't know," she said, her voice choked. "I swear, I had no idea." "I know," I said. My own voice was calm, frighteningly calm. It felt like it was coming from somewhere outside my body. Inside, a storm was raging, a hurricane of fury and grief so powerful I thought it might tear me apart. I thought of the photo that hangs in my office, a picture of me, 35 years old, standing next to a single cleaning cart with a mop and a bucket. My first contract. I remembered the exhaustion, the hope, the smell of pine sol that I equated with freedom. I built this company so my son would never have to struggle like I did. I gave him everything, a name, a future, an executive's chair, and he had used it all to sharpen a knife that he plunged into my back. "He called them dead souls," Clara said, wiping her eyes. "The fake employees, that's the term for it. Dead souls." The name was fitting, because something in me had just died. The image of my son, the trust I had placed in him, the 30 years of love and sacrifice that now felt like a fool's investment. I pushed the papers back into the folder. I closed it. My hands were steady. The storm inside me had passed, leaving behind a cold, hard clarity. This wasn't just about money, it was about honor. It was about the dignity of the work he so clearly despised. He had created a mess, a deep, sprawling, rotten mess, and I was the only one who knew how to clean it up. They always say you can't clean up the most stubborn stains. They're wrong. You just need the right solvent and a willingness to scrub until your knuckles are raw. My son didn't know it yet, but I was about to teach him what it really meant to get your hands dirty. The lesson was long overdue. We sat at the kitchen table for a long time, the silence broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. The folder lay between us, a tombstone for the family I thought I had. Grief is a strange thing. It hits you in waves. For a moment, my body was racked with a sob so deep it felt like it was tearing me up from the roots. But then the wave receded, and in its place was ice. Cold, hard, and clear. Crying wouldn't fix this. Sentiment wouldn't repay the debt. Love hadn't stopped him. I looked at Clara. Her face was a mess of tear tracks and disbelief. She was a victim in this too. He hadn't just stolen from me. He'd stolen their future, their marriage, her trust. "We can't call the police," I said. The words came out flat, devoid of emotion. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. Clara looked up, her eyes wide. "But Antonia, what he did is a crime, a felony." "I know what it is," I said, my gaze fixed on the folder. "A public scandal will destroy this company. 30 years of building a reputation for honesty and reliability. Gone. Overnight. We'd be torn apart by the press, by the IRS, by our clients. Our real employees, the ones who depend on us, they'd lose their jobs. I won't let that happen. I won't let him burn it all down." I finally met her eyes. He is going to fix this on our terms. The next morning, I called Leonard Vance. Leonard has been my lawyer and my friend for 25 years. He helped me incorporate Pioneer Cleaning, helped me draft my first major contracts. He's 65, pragmatic, and has a mind like a steel trap. I met him at his office. I didn't tell him everything over the phone. I just said it was about Grayson and it was urgent. I laid the folder on his polished mahogany desk. He read through every page without a word. He didn't flinch. When he was done, he took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. He looked at me, his expression grim. "This is comprehensive, Antonia," he said quietly. He covered his tracks well, but Clara did better work. He paused. "What do you want to do?" "I want control," I told him. "Total and absolute. I want to cut him out of the financial heart of the company without destroying it from the outside. I want an agreement, Leonard. Something legally unbreakable. Something that gives him one choice. Sign it, or I hand this folder to the district attorney." For the next 2 days, we worked. Leonard drafted the documents. I made my own moves. I have a personal savings account, my rainy day fund that no one, not even Grayson, knew about. My own untouchable nest egg. I used a portion of it to hire a private investigator in California. I didn't just want a social media picture. I wanted proof. I wanted photos of Grayson with Maria and their son at the park. I wanted copies of the lease agreement for their apartment. I wanted irrefutable evidence of the life he had built on his lies. The investigator delivered in less than 48 hours. The photos were sickeningly domestic. Grayson pushing a little boy on a swing. A family portrait funded by fraud. I looked at a picture of my son laughing in the California sunshine, and I felt the last flicker of maternal softness die. I had given him everything so he could stand on his own 2 feet. Instead, he had used it to learn how to crawl through the mud of his own deceit. The plan was set. Leonard had the agreement ready. Clara had secured all the necessary corporate records. I had the proof. We were ready for the storm. On Friday afternoon, I had my assistant schedule an emergency board meeting. The attendees, me, Grayson, and Clara. The time, Sunday morning at 10. The location, the main conference room at the Pioneer Cleaning headquarters. He wouldn't see it coming. He'd walk in expecting a business problem. He had no idea that he was the business problem. And his tenure was about to be terminated. The office was unnervingly quiet on Sunday morning. The air smelled of last week's industrial cleaner, a faint sterile scent. No phones rang. No employees bustled through the halls. There was only the low hum of the building's ventilation system. Clara and I sat at the long conference table, waiting. We didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. In front of my seat was the thick legal agreement Leonard had drafted. In front of Clara's was a single file, the payroll sheet for the ghost employees. Between us, in the center of the table, we laid out the rest, the Apex Solutions invoices, the bank statements from the Cayman Islands, and on top of it all, a single glossy 8x10 photo from the private investigator, Grayson, Maria, and their son, smiling on a beach in Santa Monica. Grayson walked in at 10 o'clock sharp. He was wearing casual, expensive jeans and a polo shirt. He looked relaxed, slightly annoyed. "A Sunday meeting?" he said, tossing his keys on the table. "This had better be a 5-alarm fire." He sat down, then his eyes fell on the items spread across the table. His smile faltered. He looked from the photo to the bank statements. The color drained from his face. He looked at me, then at Clara, his expression turning from confusion to defensive anger. I let the silence hang for a beat. Then I asked my question. "How many of our employees do you know by name, Grayson? The night crew at the I-Ori Hospital, the team that does the downtown offices. Any of them?" He just stared. "Let me rephrase," I continued, my voice level and cold. "How many of the employees you've been paying a salary to for the last 5 years actually exist?" "What is this?" he blustered, gesturing wildly at the papers. "This is insane. Are you accusing me of something? Clara, what did you do?" Clara didn't say a word. She simply pushed the payroll file across the table toward him. It was open to a page listing 10 names. Next to the column authorizing direct deposit, his signature was scrawled, bold and confident on every single line. He looked at it, his jaw working. The bluff was gone. The shock was real now. He knew he was caught. And then he broke. "You!" he suddenly screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. His face was red, contorted with a rage that was terrifying in its intensity. "You did this! You suffocated me in this joke of a business. I was born for more than scrubbing floors and managing a bunch of illiterate cleaners." He stood up, knocking his chair over. "I have a mind for finance, for real business, but you kept me here, smelling of bleach and ammonia, to be your little janitor prince. So I took it. I took a severance, compensation for the moral damage of wasting my life in your glorified cleaning service." The raw ugliness of his resentment filled the room. He saw the company not as his legacy, but as his prison. He saw my life's work as a source of shame. In that moment, he wasn't my son. He was just a thief, consumed by his own pathetic sense of entitlement. I stood up slowly. The fury inside me was a white-hot, silent flame. I walked to the head of the table. "I started this business with a single mop and a bucket," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "I built it with my own hands, my own sweat, and I will not allow you, my son, to wash everything I have built into the gutter." I picked up the thick, legal document Leonard had prepared and slid it across the table. It landed in front of him with a heavy, final thud. "You have 5 minutes to sign this," I said, picking up my phone from the table. "Or my next call is to the police. The folder with all the evidence is already in my lawyer's possession. You have one choice. Sign or I press send." He stared at the document, then at my face. He was looking for a trace of the mother he knew, a sign of weakness, of love he could still manipulate. He found none. There was only the founder of a company protecting her assets. His shoulders slumped. The fight went out of him, replaced by the hollow shell of defeat. He sank back into a chair, not the one he had knocked over, but another one, as if seeking a fresh start. His hands were trembling as he reached for the document. The silence was absolute. The only sound was the rustle of paper as he turned the pages, his eyes scanning the dense legal text without really reading it. He knew what it was. It was the end of his life as he knew it. It was surrender. He didn't look at me or Clara. He just stared at the final page, the one with the signature line waiting for him. "What is this?" he finally whispered, his voice hoarse. "Those are the new rules," I said, my tone leaving no room for negotiation. "Read them." He licked his lips, his eyes darting across the first page. I knew the terms by heart. Leonard had made them simple, brutal, and effective. First, he would immediately and irrevocably sign over his 49% share of the company to me. Pioneer Cleaning Services would be 100% mine once again. Second, he was terminated as executive director, effective immediately. He was stripped of all titles, all authority and all access to company finances. His corporate credit cards were already canceled. Third, his personal assets, bought with stolen money, were to be liquidated. The $120,000 sports car, the collection of watches worth over $50,000. The funds would be used to begin repaying the $1.5 million he had stolen. It was a drop in the bucket, but it was a start. Fourth, he was still legally obligated to support his other child. A trust would be established, funded by a portion of his future earnings. Clara and I would be the trustees. We would ensure the child was cared for, but Maria would not see another dime of this company's money. He would have no control over it. He read all that, his face growing paler with each clause. But he hadn't gotten to the last part yet, the part that wasn't about money, the part that was about atonement. "There's a final condition," I said, making him look up. "You aren't leaving this company. You stole from it, and now you will serve it. For 1 year, you are an employee, a technician, grade 1. He looked confused. "A technician?" "A cleaner," I clarified, using the word he despised. "You will be assigned to the night shift. You'll be part of the crew that handles our most difficult contracts, the emergency rooms at Denver General, the 24-hour shopping centers after closing. You will punch a clock. You will wear the uniform. You will scrub floors and clean toilets and haul trash. You will be paid the standard hourly wage for a new hire. Any complaints, any missed shifts, any refusal to work, and this agreement is void. The police get the folder. That is your penance." He stared at me, his mouth slightly open. The sheer poetic cruelty of the punishment seemed to finally dawn on him. The former director in his designer suits would be wearing a blue jumpsuit and pushing a mop. He would have to face the very people he had called illiterate cleaners as a peer. He would have to live the life he held in such contempt. He finally picked up the pen. His hand shook so badly that his signature was a jagged, barely legible scrawl. But it was done. He slid the document back, to me, completely and utterly broken. As I took it, a thought echoed in my mind. He didn't know that I still remember how to remove the most stubborn stain, and his betrayal was no exception. The cleanup was just beginning. His first night was a Monday. I didn't go to the depot to see him off. I didn't need to. I could picture it perfectly. I knew the smell of the locker room at 3 a.m, a mix of stale coffee, sweat, and industrial soap. I knew the feel of the starchy blue uniform, the one with the pioneer cleaning patch on the chest. He would have traded his $1,000 Italian shoes for a pair of steel-toed, slip-resistant work boots. Heavy, clumsy, unforgiving. His supervisor was a man named Hector Ramirez. Hector has been with me for 20 years. He's a good man, a fair man, but he takes no nonsense. I had a brief conversation with him. I told him Grayson was to be treated like any other new hire. No special treatment, no exceptions. Hector just nodded. He understood. Their assigned location was Denver General Hospital, the emergency room. There is no harder, messier, or more humbling job in this business. It's a constant battle against the grim realities of the human body. Blood, sickness, despair. The things people leave behind when they are in pain or in terror. Hector's report the next morning was concise. Grayson was assigned to sanitation duty for the ER waiting area and public restrooms. He was shown how to operate the floor buffer and the wet vac. He was quiet. He didn't make eye contact. He was slow. At his first attempt to change the trash liner in a large bin, he tore the bag, spilling its contents onto the floor he had just mopped. The crew had to wait while he cleaned up his own mess. He threw up in a utility closet around 5 a.m. He finished his shift. I read the report while drinking my morning coffee at the kitchen table. I felt no satisfaction, no joy in his humiliation, just a profound, aching sadness. This was the consequence, the necessary, brutal math of his choices. I remembered my own first time cleaning a hospital. I was 28. I had a 2-year-old Grayson at home. I was terrified of the germs, of the suffering that seemed to seep into the very walls. But I needed the work, so I learned to compartmentalize. I learned to see the dirt, not the story behind it. I focused on the task, to make it clean, to make it safe, to bring a small measure of order to the chaos. It was a job that required respect, a respect my son had never understood and was now being forced to learn on his hands and knees. He had wanted to live like a king. Instead, he was cleaning up after the sick and the dying. There was a terrible, grinding justice in that. The first few months were a blur of silent misery for him. I saw it in the weekly time cards, in Hector's brief, factual reports. He was perpetually exhausted. The physical labor was harder than he could have ever imagined. His hands, once soft and manicured, were now calloused and raw. His body ached. He lost weight. He worked. He went home to his empty, half-sold house, and he slept. His old life was gone. The friends who had admired his wealth and charisma vanished the moment his sports car was towed away and his credit cards were declined. He was an outcast, a ghost. On the job, he was treated with a mixture of contempt and suspicion. The other members of the crew knew exactly who he was. They had all seen him walk through the office in his expensive suits, talking on his phone, barely acknowledging their existence. Now he was one of them, but not really. They called him director in mocking tones. They'd leave the worst tasks for him: a biohazard spill in a trauma bay, a backed-up toilet in the public restroom. They were testing him, waiting for him to break, waiting for him to complain, to pull rank, to prove he was still the arrogant boss's son they all thought he was. But he didn't. He never complained. He never refused a task. He just did the work. Head down, his face a grim mask. He'd clean up the filth, his movements clumsy at first, then more practiced. He learned how to handle the chemicals without burning his skin. He learned the specific, methodical way you clean a hospital room to prevent cross-contamination. He learned the difference between cleaning for appearance and cleaning for safety. Slowly, imperceptibly, something began to shift. It wasn't friendship. It wasn't forgiveness. It was something much simpler. The mockery started to fade, replaced by a grudging silence. One night during their 30-minute break, a woman on the crew named Sophia dropped her thermos, spilling coffee all over the floor of the break room. She swore in Spanish, exhausted. Before anyone else could move, Grayson got up, grabbed a mop from the utility cart, and cleaned it up. He didn't say a word, just cleaned it, rinsed the mop head, and put it back. He sat back down in silence. The next night, Sophia silently slid a cup of coffee from her own thermos across the table to him. He nodded. That was it. An entire conversation without a single word. Hector's report that week had a new sentence at the end. He is starting to work with the team. While he was scrubbing floors, Clara and I were scrubbing the books. The damage was extensive. We terminated the contract with his sham company, Apex Solutions, and negotiated a new fair market deal with a legitimate national supplier. We eliminated the ghost employees, a move that immediately saved us over $700,000 a year. The numbers were ugly, but they were finally real. Clara was a rock. She worked tirelessly, her jaw set with a determination I recognized in myself. We were a team, cleaning up a mess of our own. The business was sick, but it wasn't terminal. We were saving it. Working from the bottom changes your perspective. From the executive suite, Grayson had seen the company as numbers on a spreadsheet: profit margins, labor costs, supply expenditures. Down on the floor, he saw the reality behind those numbers. He saw the faulty wheel on a cleaning cart that made it twice as hard to push. He saw the chronic shortages of a specific disinfectant because of an inefficient ordering process he himself had designed. He saw the toll that mandatory overtime took on a single mother like Sophia. He was seeing, for the first time, the engine of the company he had tried to wreck: the people. About 6 months into his sentence, I got a call from Hector. It was unusual for him to call me directly. "Antonia," he said. "Something happened last night I thought you should know." He told me that a new hire, a young kid, had accidentally mixed ammonia and bleach in a small, poorly ventilated utility closet. A classic, dangerous mistake. Grayson had been nearby. He smelled the chemical reaction instantly, recognized the toxic gas. He didn't panic. He grabbed the kid, pulled him out of the closet, and sealed the door. Then he calmly called for a supervisor and directed everyone away from the area until the hazardous materials team could clear it. He had acted quickly and correctly. He had prevented a serious injury. The kid was scared, Hector said. Grayson just told him, "We all make mistakes. Now you know not to make this one again." He sounded, I don't know, like a manager. Later that week, I received an inter-office memo. It was from Grayson. It was the first direct communication I'd had from him in half a year. It wasn't personal. It was a single typed page. In it, he had outlined a simple, practical solution to the supply shortage problem he'd witnessed on his shift. He proposed a small change in the inventory software he had once implemented, a change that would allow night supervisors to place emergency orders directly rather than waiting for the day shift manager. It was a smart, efficient idea, an idea he never would have had from his old office. It would save time and make the crew's job easier. He had signed it simply, G. Reed Technician Night Shift. I held the piece of paper in my hand. It was more than just a suggestion. It was the first sign that he wasn't just serving his time. He was paying attention. He was learning. For the first time in a very long time, he had taken a piece of the business and tried to make it better, not for his own gain, but for the good of the work itself. I folded the memo and put it in my desk drawer. The trust was still a ruin. The family was still a crater. But for the first time, I saw a flicker of something in the rubble. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But a possibility. A chance that the man I had raised wasn't entirely gone. A chance that this brutal, painful, necessary cleaning might actually be working. I implemented Grayson's suggestion. I didn't tell him, of course. I simply had the IT department make the software adjustment and inform the night shift supervisors of their new ordering capabilities. The change was small, but the effect was immediate. Efficiency on the night shifts improved by 15% in the first month. Fewer delays, less frustration. The crews were getting the supplies they needed when they needed them. It was a good idea. I had to admit that. It was a bitter pill to swallow, acknowledging that the son who had nearly ruined the company was still capable of helping it. It proved that the problem wasn't his mind. It was his character. On the floor, the dynamic continued its slow, glacial shift. The crew didn't embrace him as a friend. That would have been unrealistic, but they accepted him. He became part of the team's rhythm. He learned who took their coffee black, who had a kid starting high school, who was working a second job. He learned their names. Not just their first names, but their last names. He learned their stories, not because he asked, but because he was finally quiet enough to listen. He was no longer the invisible man in the expensive suit, nor was he the humiliated executive. He was just Reed, the guy who could handle the floor buffer better than anyone else on the crew, the guy you could count on to help lift a heavy trash receptacle without being asked. One night, about 8 months into his year, the past came calling. He was on his hands and knees, scrubbing a stubborn stain near the entrance to the hospital's cardiac wing. It was 4 a.m. A man in a tailored suit, his face flushed from alcohol, was leaving the hospital after visiting a friend. Grayson recognized him instantly. Richard DuPont, a property developer Grayson used to play golf with, a man he had once tried to impress with his fake stories of venture capitalism. Richard stopped, squinting in the harsh fluorescent light. Grayson Reed, my God, is that you? His voice was loud, echoing in the quiet hallway. He looked from Grayson's face to the blue uniform to the bucket of dirty water on the floor. A slow, pitying smile spread across his face. Tough times, huh? Guess that cleaning empire of your mother's finally went under. Listen, if you ever need a few bucks, give me a call. Maybe my club needs a new locker room attendant. He chuckled, pleased with his own wit. and walked away. Hector, who had seen the whole exchange, walked over to Grayson. He expected an explosion. He expected Grayson to throw the brush, to curse, to finally show the rage that must have been simmering inside him for months. Instead, Grayson just watched the man leave. He didn't seem angry or even ashamed. He just looked tired. He dipped his brush back in the bucket and went back to scrubbing the stain on the floor. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. "That stain," he said to Hector, "is from a leaking hydraulic line on a gurney. We need to use the industrial degreaser, or it will set in." In that moment, the opinion of Richard DuPont and the world he represented had become less important than a grease stain on a hospital floor. He was focused on the task, on the work, on making it clean. His last shift was a Sunday, exactly 1 year after the meeting in the conference room. There was no party, no farewell cake. It was a night like any other. They were assigned to a corporate high-rise downtown, 40 floors of empty offices, silent cubicles, and gleaming, soulless lobbies. They worked their way down, floor by floor, emptying trash cans, vacuuming carpets, cleaning glass. At 6 a.m, they punched out for the last time. Hector shook his hand. It was a firm, brief gesture. "You did the work, Reed," he said. That was all. From a man like Hector, it was the highest praise. The next day, I summoned him to the office, to the same conference room. The memories in that room were sharp and painful, like broken glass. He came in, not in a uniform, but in simple slacks and a button-down shirt. He was thinner. His face was lined with a weariness that hadn't been there before, but he stood straighter. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a quiet stillness. Clara was there, sitting beside me. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. I had Hector's final report on the table in front of me. It was short and to the point. Assignment completed, punctual, diligent, met all job requirements, became a reliable member of the team. I slid the report across the table for him to see. He glanced at it, then looked back at me, waiting. "You have fulfilled the terms of the agreement," I said, my voice formal. "The year is over. Your legal obligation for manual labor is complete." I let that hang in the air. You are, of course, free to leave the company and seek employment elsewhere. No one is forcing you to stay. He met my gaze. "I don't want to leave," he said simply. I had expected that. "There's no path back to what you were," I said, my voice hard. "That position, that trust, that salary, it is gone forever. It does not exist anymore. Do you understand that?" "Yes," he said. "I understand." "However," I continued, "your work has been satisfactory, and your suggestion regarding the supply chain software was effective." I gestured to Clara. She took over, her voice all business. "We have an opening for a supply manager," she said, her eyes fixed on him. "It's a salaried, non-executive position. The office is at the main warehouse. The job involves inventory management, procurement, and logistics. You would be responsible for ensuring all our crews are properly equipped. The salary is $60,000 a year. A significant portion will continue to be garnished to repay your debt and to fund the trust. You would report directly to me. Every expenditure, every order would require my sign-off. There are no corporate accounts. There are no bonuses. That is the offer." It was a fraction of what he used to make. It was a glorified warehouse job. It was a position of zero, power and total oversight. It was, in its own way, a life sentence of scrutiny. He didn't hesitate. "I accept," he said. That was 3 months ago. Grayson's new office is a small, windowless room with concrete floors, sandwiched between the loading dock and the chemical storage area at the warehouse. It always smells faintly of cardboard and bleach. His job is a complex puzzle of logistics. He tracks inventory on a computer, negotiates with suppliers for better prices on mop heads, and coordinates truck deliveries. He spends his days ensuring that men like Hector and women like Sophia have the tools they need to do their jobs. He is using his sharp mind, but he is using it in service, not in theft. Clara is his boss, and their relationship is strictly professional. The marriage is over. They are civil, efficient co-workers. The divorce papers are being drawn up. She got the house. He lives in a small rental apartment across town. There are no second chances for that part of his life. He shattered it too completely. Sometimes I see him. I was at the warehouse last week, and I saw him talking to Hector by the loading dock. They were looking at a new model of floor buffer. Grayson was listening intently, nodding, making notes on a clipboard. He looked up and saw me watching. He didn't smile. He just gave a slight, respectful nod, and then turned his attention back to the machine, back to the work. Our family is broken. The kitchen table where we once shared meals and dreams is now just a piece of wood. The trust, once the foundation of our world, has been ground to dust. Some stains never come out, no matter how hard you scrub. The betrayal will always be there, a permanent part of our history. But the company is clean, it's solvent, it's stable, and it's honest. And my son, for the first time in his adult life, comes home from a day's work, tired and smelling faintly of bleach. He is earning his pay. He is paying his debts. He isn't the man I had hoped he would be, but he is no longer the monster he had become. There is no forgiveness, not today, maybe not ever, but there is a quiet, difficult, and brutally honest path forward. A path built not on love or trust, but on the simple, humbling dignity of an honest day's work. It is not a happy ending, but it might just be a real one. I'm grateful you spent this time with me. If you've lived through something similar, or if my story spoke to you in any way, please share your feelings in the comments. I'd love to hear them. Your stories matter too. If you want more, don't forget to like and subscribe. Be gentle with yourself, and I'll see you in the next story.